It's a positive film. It has heroes and villains, and that it essentially is a fun movie to watch. It's been a long time since people have been able to go to the movies and see a sort of straightforward, wholesome, fun adventure.
Well, it's a fantasy. It's not science fiction so much as it is space fantasy. And it's about people. It's finally about people and not finally about science.
The story, when you actually put it into words, is only so much nonsense to hang a great visual experience onto. It's the stuff that fairy tales are made of.
Sort of boiling down religion into a very basic concept. The fact that there is some deity or some power or some force that sort of controls our destiny works for good and also works for evil.
Marvelous, healthy innocence. Great pace, wonderful to look at, full of guts, nothing unpleasant. I mean, people go bang bang and people fall over and are dead, but, no horrors. A sort of wonderful freshness about it, kind of like a wonderful fresh air.
It's got whatever you want it to be. It's pure entertainment. It's like a roller coaster ride, and it can be interpreted as long as you enjoy it, which is the intention.
Right, welcome back to Generation Skywalker, and we are still in book month for this September. This show is looking at the expanded universe and someone's favourite book. So we've got a special guest from the UK here. We've got Richard Hutchinson. Good evening, Rich.
Evening, Stu. Evening, guys.
Same guys there. We've also got Craig joining me from Generation Skywalker. Good evening, Craig.
Good evening.
Rich, great to have you on, mate. People will know that I was with you on Vintage Rebellion for 5 years. You were always the EU man on the Vintage Rebellion. You always stated how much you loved it. You even came top in a quiz on the first visual Father Tron, didn't you? Although Grant accused you of cheating, but I won't test that, mate.
Well, if you remember, I always said that when Disney came on board, they can do whatever they want with the movies, but they better leave the books alone. So, yeah, they hold that much of a special place in my heart, those books.
Well, with that in mind, then, were you disappointed when they became legend?
I suppose when I first heard about it, I thought, oh no, what are Disney doing? But then my logical head went into overdrive and I thought, well, hold on a second, they're going to be restricted by the stories. And obviously if characters have been killed in the books, or if, fan favourite characters like Mara Jade were going to be involved, it would severely restrict the creativity from the Disney team. So I thought, right, okay, fine, there can be two separate timelines. There's plenty of other franchises that have done that. And I thought, just go ahead with the EU and then keep the Disney stuff going separate. Unfortunately, looking back now, I've got to say that the creative vision from the Disney team has been pretty pathetic, I think. Some of the Disney canon books are actually really good, especially the ones from Egmont. I think the Egmont books are far better than the Del Rey novels. But nothing for me is touching the EU and the whole universe, well, not universe, galaxy, the whole area and how they expanded on the original stories. They just haven't come close.
Interesting, yeah. A bit similar to what you were saying the other night, Craig, wasn't it, earlier in the month? Especially with regards to, there's so many books, it would have been a minefield for them to be trying to step it out.
Yeah, and there's one certain character that they definitely wanted alive.
Yes, you have mentioned that. Was it? Let me see if I can remember this. It was Chewbacca, yeah? Yes.
Well, you see, I mean, obviously it's going to come up a bit later on, but I understood why they killed off Chewbacca, and I totally get that, because when you heard interviews with the writers, and Chewbacca's an incredibly difficult character to write for, because he doesn't speak, and he just grunts and growls, and other than him becoming, pretty much a bodyguard for Han Solo, who spent 20 years drinking coffee and watching from the sidelines, it was an incredibly difficult character to write, so they had to bring out a new series with a bang.
Absolutely.
Well, Rich, before we move on, let me just explain what we're doing here. So, following the Generation Skywalker's Rule of 5 kind of idea, we asked you, we're not looking at collecting books or any kind of non-fiction books. It was purely expanded universe novels. We asked you to choose your 5 favourite novels of all time over those. How long novels been coming out? They've got to be pushing 40 years as well, haven't they?
Well, yeah, so the original Star Wars novel, yeah.
Yeah, so all good there. So you had quite a range to choose from. But before we get into your choices, Rich, what is it about the expanded universe that, not everyone delves into the books like you do, but you're heavily involved?
Yeah, so for me, I started playing computer games in the mid-90s because computer games was always a safe, area for somebody growing up in the Northeast. It was, I mean, you've heard from the Vintage Rebellion days, the running stories of regular beatings if you didn't conform to certain standards. But everybody played computer games, so you got away with it. Now, in the mid-90s, you were probably a member of some kind of book club, just like what I was. I think it was the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Book Club, and it's one of those things where you get like 10 books for a penny, and then you've got to, buy a certain number per year. And one of those flyers came through the post, and in there was the Zorn trilogy. And, I just thought, wow, the continuation of these stories beyond Return of the Jedi. So I ordered those, and the reason why I went down the book route as opposed to the collecting route was purely because of almost the shame that would have, been heaped upon us if I started collecting toys as an adult. And I know now it's much easier now, but back then it would have been a case of, like, even my closest mates would have been going, "You're doing what?" And, it would have been 10, 15 years of ridicule. But even collecting books was quite tricky. So I devoured the Zorn trilogy really, really quickly. Then obviously, did what most people did and leapt into the Kevin G. Anderson stories, and then realised there was something missing, and it wasn't a book, and it didn't seem to fit, and it was a comic, which was The Dark Empire, and then I had to track that down, and I didn't realise it was a comic, and when I got it, I actually died of embarrassment, and I almost shoved it in a carrier bag, and brought it home, stuck it on my bookshelf, and just left it, because the trauma of being caught with a comic book as a kid, that was just an ultimate beatdown, and still things like that would still resonate easily in the mid-90s. So for me, it was just always a continuation of the stories. I always wanted the Lord of the Rings novels to continue. I always wanted another author to start continuing some of those tales based on, I know Tolkien left very few drafts, but there was some initial story ideas, and I was pleased to get them with Star Wars. And I think some of them are dreadful. I think there are some dreadful novels, and I think most of the novels wouldn't have made good movies at all. But the germs and the seeds of ideas in the books were entertaining. I thought they were fantastic in the whole.
What is your least favourite book, as we're not covering that?
The least favourite? I've got to say, some of them, like the Black Fleet Crisis, I thought was pretty dull, where they were just chasing these ships for 3 books and nothing seemed to happen. I wasn't a fan of the Bounty Hunter trilogy either. I didn't think that was a great set of books. I think it more so depends on the authors. I think Karen Travis, some of her books are amazing. If you haven't read any of her novels, you've got to. Some of it just tends to focus on clone troopers and the 501st and things like that, but some of her novels are absolutely brilliant, and anything that Zorn seemed to do was great. But there are some dreadful ones. The one the courtship of Princess Leia, that was so bad, such a bad book. Yeah, I think it was Dave Wolverton had written that. He's definitely he's definitely got a sex problem, that guy. It was just, there was stuff in there that didn't belong in a Star Wars book.
It's interesting how much they kind of ran with from that book, the Night Sisters and Dathomir and all that stuff. That seemed to stick.
Yeah.
But I'd agree with you on the Black Fleet Crisis novels. They were, Lando suddenly turned into Sherlock Holmes. He was a brilliant strategist and detective, and I really found the Bounty Hunter books a real slog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're in agreement, but you clearly liked the courtship of Leia. That's the.
I didn't say I liked it. I said that there's a lot of elements that ended up kind of running through.
Well, so Rich, what kind of percentage have you read of the books?
Oh, from the original EU, I'm probably only 1 or 2 novels short. I don't know how many books there are. I must easily have over 100, easy.
Wow, so you're well read when it comes to that.
Out of the old EU, I mean, obviously, mostly it was comics, because getting some of the comics was quite tricky, especially ones that are set like 150 years, that, the legacy comics and things like that. Some of them are quite tough. And every time I start to go down the route again, I go back to the start and making sure I've got the Tales of the Jedi series, which was set like 5,000 years before Star Wars. I lost interest in some of them around the Clone Wars. I think the Clone Wars have been mined to death. I think that's what started turning me off some of the EU books, the amount of books that were coming out. I didn't like the Yoda book. I thought the Yoda book was weak. But I would say of the novels, if I haven't got them all and if I haven't read them all, I must only be missing one, maybe two.
Are you reading one at the moment? I've asked everyone this so far I've had on.
I'm not actually, because I've abandoned some of my other sci-fi and fantasy books. So I'm reading, who is a Star Wars author actually, I'm reading some of the Shannara Chronicles from Terry Brooks, which are not great stories. The first one is definitely a clone of The Lord of the Rings, and I don't care what anybody says, there's so many similarities to The Lord of the Rings in these books, it's unreal. And how he never got done for plagiarism is beyond me. But I'm at the end of like a 9-book series, so I'm going to finish that off, and then I'm going to go back and start picking up some of the Egmont Disney books.
Brilliant. Right, well, so let's delve into your 5 that you sent me then, and we'll take them in the order you sent me. I don't know whether that was your order of your favourite or just a random pick out of books, but you started with, the first one you suggested was Fate of the Jedi, Omen.
Right, okay, so the Fate of the Jedi series seemed to get a lot of negative feedback from some of the fans, and when I was on some of the forums back in the day, like JediNet and things like that, that series was absolutely panned, but I loved it. The series before it, which Legacy of the Force, I think, and that was when Jason and Jaden, Han Leia's kids, one had turned like dark side, and one was light side, and they wrapped that whole lot up. I thought, well, where they're going to go now? And then this Fate of the Jedi series came out, and it was completely different. And Omen, which I think is the second book in that series, the reason why I picked that one is because it really looked at the going right back to what the Sith actually were, way before the Rule of Two, and it introduced so many backstories that had their own life, and it pretty much it introduces the Lost Tribe of the Sith. And I found the Lost Tribe of the Sith absolutely fascinating, because we've all got an idea in our head of who the Sith are, these evil guys who want power and things like that. But in the Fate of the Jedi series, and especially in Omen, they are introduced, well, very briefly introduced, as this race, but you see everything from them. You see good Sith, you see neutral Sith, you see bad Sith, you see bounty hunter Sith. There were so many different factions to the Sith, and I was absolutely fascinated going through that series. I thought it was a really, really good start to a brand new series, and I like the way they did it as well, because there were 3 authors. Aaron Alston, who I think is absolutely fantastic, he's one of the funniest authors, and he's sadly missed. He's one of the funniest authors I've read. Christy Golden's a great author as well, and Troy Denning. You might not know that Christy Golden, who always did the 2nd, 5th, and 8th of the books, he did the middle of each of them. It was supposed to be Karen Travis, which would be a shame, because I love Karen Travis, but she couldn't commit to the series. And Troy Denning's always solid, although another book series I didn't like was the one with those Vilics or whatever they're called. That was a hard read as well. But the way that they cyclically reproduced these trilogies of books was absolutely brilliant. And I loved the Omen in particular, just because it started teasing things, and it teased a character who we didn't know who it was until later on, and then we'll find out it was a character called Abeloth, who is one of the best characters I've seen in Star Wars. For those who aren't aware, she's not really Sith, and she's not really Jedi, and she's just something in the middle, and she doesn't have a form, and she can take possession of others, and it was such a great character at the start of being teased out of Woman. So that's why I went with that one. It was just one of the best books. I think the one previous to that, it was more wrapping up the previous Legacy of the Force set of books, whereas Omen started the whole path of where they were going to go to next. I like the idea of Luke Skywalker being in kind of trouble for what happened with the Jedi, and about how everybody turned against him. And it wasn't a case of like what's happened with Disney, where he legged it and ran off. It was much more of a case of he had to go and discover something, and he took Ben, his son, with him, and they went off on a discovery, trying to chase down this last tribe of the Sith. I think there's definitely Dave Filoni must have had some kind of input somewhere in that kind of storyline, because there's themes coming out of that's definitely in the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars, especially Abeloth, who could easily have been the mother of the the son, the daughter, and the father in that trilogy of the Mortis arc from Clone Wars. But Omen in itself, it teased so much, and it led the next books up really nicely. It was so well done.
In regards to the timeline of the movies, where do these books sit?
Right, so Fate of the Jedi was released in 2009, and it's set 35 years after Star Wars, so that's not going to be too far off from when The Force Awakens started, I suppose, really. So it's a good way beyond Jedi. In fact, all of the favourite books are definitely post-Jedi, because I loved where they were going. I'm not always a fan of where they've come from, although one or two of my books before then are some of my favourite as well. It's coming right to the end of the EU. I was really looking forward to where Fate of the Jedi was going to take them to, and whether there would be a Fate of the Jedi and Fate of the Sith coming afterwards, but obviously sadly all that got cancelled.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's a great summary of what was going on. I actually enjoyed the series as well. I think you've got a real good kind of contrast between some very otherworldly, the Force elementals, the stuff going on with Abeloth is fascinating, and like you say, does link back to other work that's come since. The Lost Tribe of the Sith, I thought, was a great concept, and I enjoyed the sort of background book to that, the collection of short stories that they put into one novel. And then the stuff that was happening back in Civilization, back in the in the New Republic, it kind of had a lot of very real world parallels to what was going on. There's lots of stuff about sort of politics and the media in particular. Like good sci-fi reflected what was kind of going on. What's going on in society at that time, but similar to where Battlestar Galactica went with their retelling of that story. And looking at terrorism and sort of the politics around that. So all those things kind of combined was really, really good, and it really worked.
Would you boys rather have seen this than The Force Awakens?
Yes, there's no doubt about it. When I was probably the most critical out of us about The Force Awakens, and it's interesting to note that a lot of people now are seeing kind of similar to what I said. I do find The Force Awakens very much a reboot of A New Hope at times. And it didn't push the boundaries for me. It was just far too safe. It was such a safe movie. I love The Last Jedi. I'm really going to defend it. Yes, it's got its problems, but The Last Jedi did push the boundaries, but it still didn't push the boundaries enough. And then Rise of Skywalker is kind of like an EU book, or an EU kind of series that were books that were never made into a movie. And that was the one that was starting to head towards where I think the EU may have gone. But I think the EU is a concept across everything that was made would have made better movies than what they came up with.
Interesting. Well, it sounds good. One question I will ask. You said about a series of books, and then you said that Christie Goulding had written 2, 5, and 8. How many is in the series? 9.
So it's 3 trilogies, although it's not really 3 trilogies. It's a set of 9 books. So at the end of book 3, it's not wrapped up and then another trilogy comes along. It was always going to be 9 books, but they always write them in the same order. So it goes 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They do them in the same order each time. And yet there's not really that much of a jarring. If you read books, you think, it's going to be a completely change in writing style, but there's not really. They've clearly worked so closely together that you could read these books and not really pick up on who's written which one. Which is possible a criticism in some of the other series, because I think in some of the other series you would read a book and then you turn around, look at the author when you're halfway through and go, that makes sense.
Join the cover of it as well.
Yes, I mean the Black Fleet Crisis, as I mentioned before. Another reason why I don't like is the book covers are horrendous. I think the purple, red, and I think the other one's blue. They just didn't fit with anything else that was released before or after. It was just ridiculous.
Second book. This is the one I have read. Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina.
Right, okay, so I could have really picked any of the Tales from books because I think they're all really, really good. Tales from the New Republic is a great read, but I wanted to go with something that was really early on. So Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina was released, I think it was August 1995, and it's 16 short stories that have been collected together into one novel. Now, the reason why I love this is because whenever we watched Star Wars as a kid, that cantina scene, everybody remembers it. Absolutely everybody. Non-Star Wars fans, Star Wars fans, doesn't matter what you enjoy, everybody remembers that scene. And it is a very, very short scene. And we as children would act out some of those, character stories like Snaggletooth and Hammerhead and Greedo and things like that. But this book takes many of those characters and basically discusses how and why they ended up in the cantina and what happened to them after the cantina. And I found them all absolutely fascinating stories. They were really, really good. None of them, not one of them I had in my head was anywhere near accurate to what I would have dreamed of, like Greedo's backstory, which is a bit of a shame actually, because I know you like Greedo, Stu, but he's pretty much a complete wimp in this book, and he's kind of tricked into going to confront Han Solo by some other kind of bounty hunters who knew that Han Solo was going to kill him. And it's quite a convoluted plot as to why Greedo was there in the first place. But I really liked the fact that these authors have picked one character and, woven these stories together to all fit that very, very short sequence that happened in A New Hope.
Yeah, I'm just looking through the different tales in there. First of all, Greedo's a wimp. Well, it's only legend, mate. It's not canon.
Yeah.
But, what characters are covered in here then? We don't do weddings. The band's tales, obviously, about the band.
The bits are in it a lot. Hammerhead has a story, but I always remember, I don't know if you remember, Craig, but when I read that Hammerhead story, I was actually felt really bad because he gets so badly beaten up. And the way it's described is that his eye popped out of the stalk. He was, and how old was I in 1995? So was I 20? Was I younger than 20? No, yes, I would have been 19. And I remember reading the story thinking, bloody hell, they've severely beaten up Hammerhead to a pulp, and I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I said, what have they done?
He's such a gentle character. They kind of portrayed that race as real hippies, didn't they?
Exactly. Uh-huh.
Who's got the most surprising backstory in there then? Who's Ranat?
Oh, we're asking.
The Ranat's tale.
Who's the little rat character?
I was just about to say that. The one that people often... Is that the one who some people think is Snaggletooth as well? There's a Stormtrooper story in there that was pretty good. And another one I remember as well was the one with the farmer, the moisture farmer, who basically takes pity on the Sand People. And he helps the Sand People farm for water. That's actually, I know it sounds naff, but it's actually a pretty good story. I really like that one.
Have you read Kenobi, Rich?
Yes, I have.
So that gives you a bit more heart and a bit more romance.
It does, yeah, absolutely. They're just like a feral group of humans, aren't they?
Yeah, very much like Craig.
I think one of the surprising ones for me was the Danik Jericho character. There's a chap stood at the bar. He's a very tall, thin guy, and he's smoking that pipe.
Mm-hmm.
In that kind of hooker. His backstory is that he's a vampire, and he's got these kind of proboscis that kind of come out of his cheeks and sucks the life force out of people.
Yes.
You don't see any of that on screen. It's just a guy smoking a hooker pipe at the bar. But yeah, that was a real kind of curveball, I thought, for a character.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there was one about Wuha as well.
Hey! We don't serve their kind here.
About how he ended up with the cantina. I can't remember what it is, but it was the whole story about how he hates droids and why he hates droids, and how he ended up in the cantina. That was an interesting story as well. But I don't think it was a bad tale in any of them. Obviously, there was going to be one on Dr. Everson and Ponda Baba as well. But I think the Stormtrooper one for me was quite strong. I like that. I know it isn't in this book, but in the Tales from the Empire, the one from Empire Strikes Back anyway. Is that Tales from the Bounty Hunter? I can't remember now anyway. But there was a story in there about a general in the... No, he wasn't. He was a cadet. And he was flying a snowspeeder, and it was on simulation. And it was about how you're going to take down an AT-AT. And obviously all these cadets were failing because they were trying to destroy the AT-AT with torpedoes, and they were trying to, and it was all about, look at these are our AT-ATs, nothing can bring them down. And this cadet from the Empire used the tow cable and wrapped the legs around the AT-AT. The AT-AT went down, crushed, got destroyed. And then the general wiped the footage, shipped the cadet off to some backwater, planet in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and then they got rid of all that evidence, and I thought that was a brilliant story. That was so the Empire. Oh my God, there's a fault with the art. That's what we're going to do. We'll ship this guy off somewhere and we'll wipe the footage. I thought that was amazing. Stories like that are really, really good.
Yeah, you're right. There was two from Empire. I'm just looking at them here. Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina, Tales from Jabba's Palace, Tales of the Bounty Hunters, Tales from the Empire, and Tales from the New Republic.
Mm-hmm.
You recommend all five of them, do you?
All of them. They're just nice, easy bite-sized books, and they're far better than that 40 Years of a New Hope book that came out, last year, and I think the Empire one's coming out. If it's not coming out this year, it must be very early next year. Those original books were just so good. They were so fun. They weren't interwoven in all these delicate threads. They could just go wherever they wanted to. I think as long as these guys ended up in that cantina for that short spell, they had free reign, and they were great stories.
Interestingly, they picked a couple of those and created them as standalone audiobooks.
Did they? I didn't know that.
I think the We Don't Do Weddings, the one about the band, and the one about the Night Lily.
Oh yeah.
The sort of the date that goes wrong. But yeah. you can buy those on cassette as standalone stories.
But I mean, the Night Lily one. I mean, some of these are almost bridging into almost like kind of horror. That they're not really science fiction all the time. They're definitely going to different genres.
Night Lily. What characters are we talking?
That's the one where a guy basically sleeps with this alien who is a bit like a Black Widow and kills the man after she's mated with him. Yeah, it is one of the stronger stories in that set.
There you go. Good family fun.
Good choice, Rich. Good choice. So third choice then, we move on to X-Wing Rogue Squadron.
Yes.
Bit different, this one.
And I was really, really wary of getting into them. Now, X-Wing Rogue Squadron came out January 96, and this was set maybe a year after Return of the Jedi. And the reason I was wary of getting into it is because I didn't like the title of the second book, which is Wedge's Gamble. And I thought, well, Wedge was only in Star Wars for like seconds. Why would there be a book about Wedge? But obviously, once you're reading the other novels and Wedge is in it frequently, I thought, I'm going to have to go back and read the X-Wing. So there were 24, I think it's 24 anyways, 24 comics that are also called X-Wing and come under the Rogue Squadron banner. But you don't need to read those comics. And the first four, I contacted Dark Horse years ago now, maybe about 1999. And I said, look, you can't get these first four comics in any of the trade paperbacks because they always started at comic number 5. I said, so why can't you get the first four? And they said that the first four were so disjointed from the rest of the series, they were trying to distance them from them. However, since then, and I don't know whether that was when they were taken over by, I can't remember now who overtaken them, but I know that the company was bought out by somebody else. Whether they have released it as a proper set of 4, but those first 4 comics, if you've got them, are pretty tough to track down. Now, when I've read them, I thought they don't, it's not as if they suddenly kill off Luke Skywalker or something like that. There's nothing majorly obviously wrong with the first 4 comics, and I'd love to know what the real reason is. But the books came out, I don't know, maybe about 6 months after the comics. And the reason why I was hesitant was because they don't really feature the big 3. And X-Wing Rogue Squadron didn't have Han, Luke, or Leia in it at all. And I remember thinking, am I going to like this book or not? Because, everybody wants to know what happens to Luke, Leia, in Han. How many people watched Return of the Jedi and thought, I wonder what happened to Rogue Squadron? There's not a lot of people who would have done that. But it sets up, and I think there's 9 books, but I think from memory, Mark Stackpole wrote the first 4, and then Aaron Alston wrote the next 4 or 3, and then Mark Stackpole wrote another one, and I don't know if Aaron finished it off. But there's 9 books in that series, and it's a fantastic series of 9 books. One of the best sets of any of the Star Wars novels. And the reason why I really like Rogue Squadron, is because it took the gamble that paid off. So Wedge is the main character in there. Tycho, who becomes a much bigger character later on, is also a prominent character in there. But what I like about it is the fact that it's not all fairy tales and unicorns and roses for the characters. Wedge is very much, we want Rogue Squadron set up, but you've got to pick these pilots because we need these star systems to join into the Republic, and these systems are too neutral, so we need you to get some aliens, we need you to get, and it's about Wedge's struggle trying to set up a training program And most of the pilots, they get killed off because they're not good enough to be in Rogue Squadron. And Wedge wants Tycho, but the rebel leaders don't like Tycho because there was rumours that he was an Imperial spy in the past. So Tycho is not actually allowed to fly anything, and he's got to be under observation all the time. But as you can guess in that kind of story, Tycho is obviously going to have a real main part to play later on. And I read through that book so quick. I haven't read as many books as fast as I did in that one, but I was just enthralled by it. I love the protagonist, who is Izan Icehard, and she becomes a bigger character herself later on in the novels, and it introduces some of the characters like Corran Horn, who becomes much bigger later on. And I just like the whole idea about the X-Wing Rogue Squadron, about trying to form an elite group. And I think the current movies have suffered from not having Rogue Squadron. If there's a space battle, it was always Poe. It always focused on Poe. We didn't know who, Black 1, Black 2, Black 3, we didn't know who those were. And Rogue Squadron took all of those characters from, A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, well, at least their numbers, and give them back to us again and give us new stories about Rogue Squadron. And I absolutely loved it. It was a fantastic book. Michael Stackpole was, for me, one of the key people who drove the EU.
Just reading, actually, it says here that it's the first novel not to feature any of the heroic trio with Luke, Han, and Leia. So obviously that's always a gamble. First book that's going to step outside of the lovable heroes. But...
Well, it's too easy to have something like Rogue Squadron where everybody's failing and then there's one ship left and Luke Skywalker comes in and is Rogue 5 again and comes along and saves the day. It was too easy to do that, and they kept away from all of that. And yes, Han, Luke and Leia do appear in the Rogue Squadron books later on, but they're always minor characters. They're always just passing through or having meetings, and you don't miss them. You absolutely do not miss them at all.
I couldn't agree more with your appraisal of this series, Rich. It's great. I too devoured it. I think it's very accessible, and you would think, from the outside looking in, it's a bit militaristic. It's about the hardware. It's about the ships. It's a bit macho, but it was such a great sort of character study. You got to care about these people very quickly. I thought Corran Horn was a great character as your access point into kind of his involvement with the squad. And they zip along. They zip along at a pace.
What I wish they'd done was, I wish they did a TIE Fighter series, because I would like to know about the TIE Fighter pilots. And I know that Baron Fell had his 501st in the comics, and Baron Fell was a key character later on, or his son. I can't remember the name of the other Fell character now. But I would like to have seen the Empire's version of that and what they were doing, and kind of bit like what we see in The Mandalorian with the biker scouts, which I think is one of the best parts of Mandalorian, is them two biker scouts just prattling on and firing with these defective weapons. I would like to have seen their side of it, and for them complaining about the quality of their equipment and how they went about training, and did they all think they were expendable, because the rogues were told clearly they were expendable, but they all threw themselves in every mission. And yes, it got a bit silly at times by, like, for example, a Gamorrean guard flew one of the X-Wings, and an Ewok with stilts flew an X-Wing. But it was done so well that you just accepted it, because Aaron Alton's one of the, I think, was the first one called Wraith Squadron from memory.
That's right, yeah.
From
the bunch of misfits.
Yeah, the bunch of misfits. And it's just so funny. If you're going to take it serious, you don't follow Star Wars. If you're going to take it serious, simple as that, you do Star Trek. But for such a funny set of tales, Wraith Squadron kept it going, and the best thing they did, I think, was not continued Rogue Squadron. When they're going to bring in the Gamorrean Guard and they're going to bring in all these characters, they had an oddball unit, and they were so good, and then they bring Rogue Squadron back into it later on. Can't praise that series enough. I would love to see Disney do a show featuring Rogue Squadron, like a TV series.
10 books. Didn't see that coming.
Was it 10? I thought it was 9.
I think they bring Wraith Squadron back for Mercy Kill at the end.
Oh, they did. Yes, Mercy Kill. Yes, you're right. Mm-hmm.
So this is a good one for the collector as well. I'm just looking here now. You've got loads of different artwork: German, Japanese, Russian, Polish, Spanish, UK. So some variants to get there, Rich.
Yeah, forget variants.
Another one to check out then. Yeah, not.
And the comics. Some of those comics were really good as well. Some were terrible, The Warrior Princess from memory was a bad one, but there was some really, really good comics as well, especially when Baron Feller came into it.
No idea what you're talking about, I'm going to be honest.
To get into it, man.
Yeah, I do enjoy them. It's just, sometimes when I read, I want to read stuff that's not Star Wars that takes up my days most days. So
yeah,
it's
a different type of Star Wars, though. It does. I think when they launched it, they build it as kind of Top Gun, Star Wars Top Gun, and they you do get these stories throughout the EU that can do lift other properties. There's a story called Shatterpoint, which is Mace Windu going upriver to find a rogue Jedi, which is just Apocalypse Now. And then there's a couple of books which follow a kind of mobile army surgical hospital, which is very similar to MASH. So you do get these parallels sometimes.
If you like Rogue One, this would be the set of books that are going to be so closest to that kind of, we've got to do something to get out. That's a kind of...
Yeah, sounds interesting, yeah. Right, so moving on to book 4, and obviously...
Yeah.
Vector Prime, written by Ron Salvatore, not the Ron Salvatore that collectors will know.
Yeah, so this came out in October 1999, and I think it was needed. I think the franchise needed a fresh wave because it was... I think the Black Fleet Crisis was just before it. The Corellian trilogy was not long before this as well. And it was getting to a point, and I've always been critical of movies where characters need to die. And there weren't enough deaths for me in The Last Jedi, and there definitely weren't enough deaths in The Rise of Skywalker. And yes, The Force Awakens killed off Han Solo, but it wasn't really a gamble. If anybody was going to be killed off, it was him. So Vector Prime came along, and they quite clearly thought, right, we need a fresh start, what we're going to do. We can't bring the Sith back just yet, it's too soon. We've fought the Empire for, up to that point, I think this might be 20 years after Jedi, so we've fought the Empire for the best part of 20 years. Surely they're defeated now, and they thought, what's out there? What's outside of the whole Star Wars galaxy that I know of? So this book brings in a brand new set of characters, and these characters, what I like about them is they don't care about Jedi, they don't care about Sith, they haven't even heard of them. They've just come into this galaxy to take over, and it very much reminds me of V. And I loved V, the TV series. So these characters are aliens who can, infiltrate. They know about politics. They can take over. They're ruthless. And some things in here were fantastic. I mean, the fact that the Jedi couldn't detect them. It was just they were blank. They couldn't read them at all because they were from a different galaxy. They were completely alien, and I loved that concept. And I know there was a little bit of that in the Zorn trilogy where the Islamiri pushed back the Force, but these were different. They just couldn't detect them at all. There was just nothing there, and I loved that. And I loved the fact that also that these were highly skilled. So a Jedi, and I want to say it was Corran Horn, had a battle with one of the Yuuzhan Vong, and it was a really, really good battle, and it was a clever way that Corran had killed the other character. But the Jedi were not getting the upper hand, because if you put the Jedi up against any of the Empire characters, they're always going to win. But against these Yuuzhan Vong, the Yuuzhan Vong were quite capable of matching them and defeating the Jedi. Now, what I also like about these books, I don't know if you know this, Craig, but a lot of these books were released as hardback and paperback, but some were only released as paperback and never as hardback. And that's because there are so many of them. There were at least 20 of them, at least 20 books. But the reason why they've done them that way is if you don't want to read all 20 books, you read the ones that were just released in hardback and you got the story. Whereas the paperbacks that come in between them that weren't released as hardback, they are just continuations, and you could miss those books out and it won't change the overall, journey of the story. But I ate everything I could up with those books. The one disappointment I had was that one of the books was released as an ebook only, and it was the first time they had done it. And I was just like, how can a collector get an ebook when I didn't want it? And I got a PDF, and I remember getting a PDF, and I read the PDF, and I felt dirty, and I was kind of like,
exactly the same.
What do I do with this? So I actually printed it out, hole punched it, and put it in a folder. But then another story came out. But then luckily the book was actually released inside the paperback version of another book, and that annoyed us because I'd I meant that some of the hardback books I got, I had to buy again as paperback to get the ebook version of a story, and quite often they were put together with books from different sequences. So you might find a book in the Vector Prime area, but it was released with the Legends of the Fate of the Jedi, or something like that. So that's when it started going downhill for me. But the book began with a Y. I can't remember what it was called now. But yeah, that book in particular, and killing Chewbacca off. I know Ron Salvatore got a lot of abuse for that, and people hated it. But I actually went, good on you, because if you read all the books up to that point, it was kind of like Chewie did the same thing over and over and over again. Han Solo was very poorly written. I don't know what you think about Han Solo's character, Craig, but I think Han Solo a lot of the time was a tired man who would sit with a cup of calf watching things, didn't want to get involved in the politics, went and had a punch up, come back on the calf, and he was just like that all the time. So the fact that they killed Chewie made his character better, I think, because you saw a different emotion from Han Solo from that point on.
So there was a couple of books afterwards where he goes off the rails, isn't he?
Completely off the rails, yeah, where he almost lets one of his sons dies, and then obviously his son does die later on. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I've never read this. How do they kill Chewbacca? Is it like a really dynamic and kind of explosive end, or is it some real weak killing?
You couldn't get much more explosive. So basically, the Falcon's taken off, and the ramp is lifting. And I don't know which other characters, but the characters are getting on. Chewbacca is the last, and I think Anakin Solo is the second last, possibly. Yeah. And I think Chewbacca helps Anakin to get onto the Falcon, but Anakin cannot help Chewbacca get on. So the ramp comes up, it shuts off, the Falcon takes off, and a moon comes down and crashes into the planet that Chewbacca's on. So basically, he's hit by a moon, and the way it's described in the book is basically is that Chewbacca stands there and he just shakes his fists up in the air and yells. I can't remember if Han Solo knows at that time what's happened, or if they take off and then he realizes later on what's happened. But yeah, he's killed by a moon.
Drop on his head. Is that dramatic enough for you, Stu?
Yeah, I didn't see that coming, to be fair.
He did.
Well, yeah. I should hope so too. He's got a great moon heading at him. I take it this is set quite a way after Jedi again.
Yeah, after Jedi, you're probably looking at about 16, somewhere between 16 and 20 years from memory. Yeah, a long time after Jedi. The characters are starting to become old, and a lot of the younger characters are taking over at this point.
Not, I know we've mentioned the covers a few times here, but not one that would have gripped me if I saw it on the shelf with that funny like a skeleton chap.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say it reminds me of V.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
it was a really big deal at the time. I mean, they got Mark Hamill back to voice over the ad as Luke. He reprised his role in effect, you know.
I had fought the worst of all wars and witnessed the redemption of evil. I have seen balance restored to the Force, but order can turn to chaos, as it did when I was born. Now, with my loved ones and my loyal allies, I face a new challenge unlike any before. And I'm not sure at this time we can win.
Star Wars Vector Prime by R.A. Salvatore, the first novel of the new Jedi Order.
So, recommendation of this one. I'm going to ask you in a minute what you're going to recommend me to read first out of your list. But Vector Prime. Yeah, I did have to Google it when I saw it come up. But yeah. Interesting. So your last book, Rich, which we did an intro show, and we all had to bring one book to the table that we love in any aspect of Star Wars, and Dan Burgess did actually pick this exact book. So Darth Plagueis is your final choice.
Well, I could have easily went with another post-Jedi book, but I thought, look, I'm going to have to look at the prequels, because there are some good prequel books. And there are some good books that are set around the time of the Clone Wars. And now I think about it, I should have picked one of the Karen Travis books, because they are such a good set of books to read. But I went with Darth Plagueis because I thought, you know what, I did really enjoy this book, and it's a one that you can get into without reading 50 other novels. It's just such a standalone one. All you need to have done is watch The Phantom Menace. So it came out in January 2012, which is 8 years ago now, more than 8 years ago. And what's interesting about it is it adds so much depth to the Phantom Menace, and that, like, how many people knew that Darth Plagueis was actually alive during the Phantom Menace, and that Darth Sidious was actually still his apprentice at the time. And it was about how Darth Plagueis had actually set so many things in motion, but he didn't realise that Darth Sidious was already playing him well before Darth Sidious was playing his master, plan. So in this one, basically Plagueis, well, it starts off actually with Plagueis dying, and then after the initial start of that, it goes back 35 years. I mean, that's not much of a spoiler word. Obviously, everybody knew Plagueis had died, but it was done quite well that way. And it starts off with Plagueis being younger, and he discovers that another Sith apprentice is being trained by his master. So he kills his master and takes the apprentice over his own. Now, because of that, he's then on the path to, I can't die. I can't have anybody hunting me down. I can't have anybody challenging me. So he hunts down and kills all the other potentials, and he experiments a lot of them, trying to control the midi-chlorians. And in this book, it tells also about Darth Maul. So Sidious goes to Dathomir, is given Darth Maul, and then he takes Darth Maul over to Mustafar, and then he gets trained in secret. So not only has Darth Plagueis got Darth Sidious as his apprentice, Darth Sidious also starting off his apprentice as well. So you can see things are automatically, in play. And both Plagueis and Sidious, they think that Anakin might have been created by Darth Plagueis playing around with midi-chlorians, trying to create the life from nowhere, suggesting that Anakin might have been a Sith experiment. And now, obviously, that wasn't taken much further on. And, the rumours of that the 25th issue of the most recent Vader comic series by Disney, it doesn't tell you who Anakin's dad was, So there was all this hype about it. Anakin's dad's revealed in the comic. He wasn't, so don't buy it if you think that's what's going to happen. But it makes the events of the Phantom Menace so much bigger because we see Sidious and Plagueis' interview, such as, it was Plagueis who was the one who, convinced Cephadius to go to, to Camino, to start commissioning the clones and all that kind of stuff. And Plagueis is leading all of that, but it's actually Sidious who's leading Plagueis to lead all of that, So it's such a great interwoven tale.
Yeah, it does sound good. It's to me, it sounds like they were going to do a series or a standalone film. It would fit perfectly in the old lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Craig, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, occasionally you get these books that really, add something to the Star Wars lore, and this is one of them. And there's a lot going on, and it really, as Rich said, it enriches the prequels. And he's a fascinating character. He's got this mad scientist kind of angle to him with all these experiments and things, this underground labs, and it's a really good read. And if people want to dip their toe into the EU or the Legends particularly, it's a really good place to start because it's quite self-contained.
The history of the book itself is interesting because I think they were always going to look at Palpatine's background, but the original novel that they were working on was to see if Qui-Gon Jinn and Palpatine were pretty much similar characters, just on different sides of the Jedi Sith. And was Qui-Gon Jinn himself also wanting to create life, And it was a really interesting plot that they sketched out before it was cancelled completely because they decided they weren't going to do Palpatine's backstory. But then 3 or 4 years later, from memory, they restarted it all again, but with a different storyline. But I like the idea that Qui-Gon Jinn is very, very like Palpatine in what he may have been, willing to do.
Interesting.
Certainly one that I'm going to return to once I finish maybe my current book, Darth Plagueis. I think it's I bought it as an audio book and I listened to it, but when you do stuff, I don't think you're really taking what you're listening to, and I'll have to have a search because I will still have it somewhere. Rich, if out of these 5 books, if we could wipe your memory that you've not read one of them so you could enjoy it fresh again, which one would you choose?
I think I would have to go with the X-Wing Rogue Squadron because by doing that, I'm then going to read the other 10. So you've actually given us 10 books there by doing that one.
You might have read the other 9 and thought, actually, this makes sense now.
Misbook one out. But you see, I mean, you'll be in the same boat as me. Every Christmas, every birthday, you get something bought for you that doesn't make sense. So every birthday for me, I get bought a book by my daughter. And she brings a book, and it could be by any author that I've not heard of. Sometimes I have, and it'll have written on the side of it, book 6. And I'll say to her, you've bought me book 6. So what you're basically saying is, I've now got to go and buy books 1 to 5. Might not enjoy books 1 to 5, but I'm going to have to get them in order to read your book 6. And she'll go, oh yeah, didn't notice that. So yeah, I suppose I could have done that. I might have started X-Wing with Wedge's Gamble and thought I'm just going to miss the first one out.
Well, there you go, very possible. That's really unappreciative, Rich. You should really just say to it, oh, that's brilliant, lovely present.
I've told her to give us a book token if she wants to buy his books, but she never listens.
Do you know what? This is quite funny. My father-in-law is 20 miles down the road from you, and he would also say, what am I going to do with book 6? So perhaps it's something to do with your area, the bluntness. Yeah.
Well, it's much more likely that she walks into Waterstones and sees book 6, 2 for a tenner or something like that. That's probably what it is. Whereas book 1's £6.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Rich, they all sound brilliant. You're recommending me the X-Wing Rogue Squadron, yeah?
Yes, X-Wing Rogue Squadron, without a doubt. And there's no reason why the X-Wing Rogue Squadron couldn't actually be canon, because of it doesn't touch the big 3, very much at all.
Yeah, brilliant. And hopefully we will see something like that. The TV show seems to be the route they're going, and it sounds like it's kind of set up for that kind of system to be on the screen.
I hope so. I'd love to watch an X-Wing's TV series.
Yeah, got to be better than Resistance. That's hey, I'm sure one of you two just does enjoy Resistance. I just can't get into it.
Yeah, I've watched them all and they're dire.
I think I'm about halfway through. I haven't gone back to it yet.
Doesn't get better.
The completist in me just feels like I need to get through it.
Yeah, I felt the same. I've even got the books. The books are better than the TV show.
I would hope so. Rich, can I just say what a great curated list this is? Stuart sent me over last night, and I looked through the books, and it's a really good cross section.
Mm-hmm. That's what I went for.
And eras, and yeah.
I mean, I could easily do another 5 that I love just as much. That you said, The Lost Tribe of the Sith. I remember, that one's another set of short stories, 7 from memory, and that's set so far, hundreds of years earlier before the Phantom Menace. That's another great set of books.
So you two both seem to like the books you've mentioned, Rich. Craig's like, oh yeah, I love this one as well. Craig's mentioned a couple. You've gone, yeah, I love that. So I think the pair of you need to start up a book club because you're very in sync together when it comes to the books. You both dislike the same at the beginning as well. So so if anyone wants to join the Spivey Hutch book club,
I really enjoyed this. Yeah. I said on the intro show, I've never really hung out with book people, so it's really interesting to talk to somebody else who's read these and kind of have your views validated a little bit. What was good and what was perhaps not so good.
Very good point. Well, just to our listeners, as you might have heard in the previous shows this month, I am going to do a big book giveaway in the final show of the month. So during this show, I have purchased a nice copy of Vector Prime, and I've also managed to find the audiobook of We Don't Do Weddings by Kathy Tyers, I think her name is. Can't read my own writing there. From the Mos Eisley Cantina things on CD. So we'll add both of those to the pile for that price one. So get involved on that last show. Rich, thank you so much for taking your time to come on. Bit different to the usual collecting kind of interviews. So you're an obvious choice when it came to books. And I'll let you off. You do know your stuff. I think you've read your books.
Yeah, cheers, guys. I mean, I always enjoy talking to you. The same as Craig. Back in the day, I was talking to people on JediNet and the Force.net, through message boards and things, talking about books. But it all went away when the collecting took over and nobody else was interested.
Kept you in. It kept you in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's what I think.
But cheers for having us on, guys. We thoroughly enjoyed it.
Really do appreciate it, Rich. Just before we go, don't forget, you can check us out on YouTube by searching Generation Skywalker, on our social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, Generation Skywalker, and of course at www.generationskywalker.com, where you'll find all our blogs, all our enhanced versions and all our shows with links, etc. to it. Yeah, Rich, thank you once again, mate. Really do appreciate it, and look forward to having you on again in the future for collecting.
Absolutely, my pleasure, mate.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too, really did. So it is also good night from me. We are Generation Skywalker.